Millennials are the most financially screwed generation in history. After all, mortgage rates are at their most expensive level since 2001. Food prices are rising at the fastest rate in decades, and the cost of living has gotten so high that 40% of Gen Z now works multiple jobs. Fortunately though, there is a solution and a strategy for anyone who wants to escape the hamster wheel and build their wealth, even when you're starting out with nothing. And the best part is that it's not the generic work hard, save at least 10% of your income, drive a used car, and stop drinking Starbucks coffee advice. So in terms of getting rich in your 20s starting today, and actually being able to make a sizable difference using what you already have, here are the best recommendations that have worked really well for me that anybody would be able to follow, regardless of their income, background, or education. Before we go into the step-by-step specifics, I just want to say this because it's very important. Be careful who you listen to. There's a lot of people out there who have nothing going for themselves, who do nothing with their lives, but who love to tell you what they think you should do any chance they get. These are often the people who tell you that you deserve to live it up when you're young, or that credit scores don't matter, or that you should go to a good college and get a good job to be successful, or that starting a business is too risky and you shouldn't even try because you have a high chance of failing. Don't get the wrong idea here. Usually, the people that tell you these things tend to believe it themselves and have good intentions. Unless, of course, they have deep-seated insecurities and hate seeing other people do better than them. But the fact is, if you really want to build your wealth, you have to go against the grain and do what most people are not doing. And that includes only listening to people who are where you want to be. If you take advice from broke people who are miserable at their 9-to-5 jobs, chances are you'll end up like them. I recently heard a saying that really caught my attention. Don't take advice from someone who you wouldn't want to trade places with. Following that is going to narrow down your focus in terms of who you'll listen to, and chances are that's the advice that you should follow. Now, since the goal here is to build wealth, you'll need to make a lot of money. But one of the ways that you could do that and help speed up the process is with a good credit score. Whether you like it or not, those three numbers dictate whether or not you'll get an apartment, get a low interest rate when you buy a house, leverage your money, or sometimes even get a job. So if you want a step-by-step guide on how you can do exactly that, let me lay it out for you right now. First, if you have no credit history whatsoever, go and apply for something like a Discover It secured card. They'll just ask you to put down a deposit, usually a few $100s that they'll give you back in about 8 months. And from there, all you'll need to do is get in the habit of putting a few small, normal charges on the card every single month, and then paying it off in full on time. It's that easy. Now, alternatively, if you don't want to use a credit card to do this, just head over to Google and search for the following: debit cards that build your credit. And voila, you'll be flooded with all the options out there. Second, you should also sign up for a free credit monitoring software like Credit Karma, Credit Sesame, or Experian. This is going to help you monitor your credit score on a regular basis for the low cost of nothing. There's really no downsides to doing this. You should just do it. Then third, after 6 months of doing that, open up another credit card like the Bank of America Cash Rewards card, the Wells Fargo Active Cash card, or Chase Freedom card. That's because the more on-time payments you have, the higher your score is going to be. So do the same thing as before. Open up the new credit card, put a few small charges on it, and then pay it off each month in full by the time it's due. Then fourth, after about 12 months of doing that, you could open up your first charge card like the American Express Gold. Now, this one does have an annual fee, but it has so many perks and features that pay for itself many times over. And because it doesn't technically have a limit, it's not going to report credit utilization, which is going to push your score up even higher. And finally, fifth, after about 18 months of doing this, you should have a credit score between 700 and 750, which will generally get you the lowest interest rates anytime you apply for financing. Thirdly, even though improving your credit score is certainly going to help you build wealth, it's not enough on its own to actually make money. That's why if you want to set yourself up on the financial fast track for the rest of your life, you really need to get as much work experience as possible. Every job you take is going to give you a different skill set that you can then leverage into the next job. And each time you try something new, you're going to learn what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, and what you're bad at. And I can pretty much guarantee, as a result of doing all of that, you're going to make more money. In terms of what you could do specifically, since I know everyone wants a really simple step-by-step guide, here's what's worked really well for me. First, you should decide what your dream career is. To help with this, I would recommend watching YouTube videos from creators who have been in careers that you are interested in. Then second, find a way to start working on that dream career as soon as possible. If this is something that requires a certain certification, license, or skill, go and work towards that. If it's a career that people do on their own, like being an entrepreneur, find people in the field that you want to get into and see if you can work for them, even if it's for free, just to get the experience so that eventually, one day, you could do it on your own. Then from there, number 3, if you realize maybe it's not a good fit, you don't enjoy it as much as you thought you did, or maybe it's different than what you expected, try something new and start the process over again. All of this is about using your 20s strategically to stack knowledge and relevant work experiences. And unless you have bills to pay, I recommend not even trying to make money at this point, because I promise the experience that you get now will be worth 10 times more money in the future than what you would be able to make today. But if you're able to find a position that pays you and still presents a great learning opportunity, that's the ideal scenario. Congrats! And after that, if your goal is to make a lot of money, like more than $500,000 a year, you're probably going to have to pick a business that's scalable. Like, let's be real. If you want to build your wealth really fast, you're probably not going to get there with a traditional job unless that job pays you an exorbitant amount of money, or you're really good at call options or OnlyFans. So instead, my recommendation is this. Pick a job or a career that's not dependent on how many hours you work. For a lot of people in Canada and the US, a great career towards that end is becoming a real estate agent. It doesn't matter if you work 2 hours or 200 hours. If you didn't sell a house, you wouldn't get paid. Now personally, if it were up to me, I think something like sales is probably one of the most underrated careers out there. It's usually a stepping stone to making a lot more money. It'll teach you everything you need to know about time management and customer service, and it'll usually provide the funding for you to do almost anything else you want to do later in life. Generally speaking, most people you hear about who make a ton of money when they're young do so by starting their own business. And best of all, when it comes to doing this, pretty much everything you need to know is already on YouTube for free. And learning how to be self-sufficient, to find the answers yourself, is going to help you tremendously, no matter what you decide to do in your life. If you're still in your 20s, single, and have no serious financial obligations, I really don't see much downside to starting your own business. Worst case, you learn a lesson. Best case, you never have to go back to a 9-to-5 again. But maybe you don't want to go door knocking or cold calling strangers to sell them real estate, but you also don't want to pick up another job. What can you do in that case? Well, I recently found a side hustle that is both scalable and also pretty enjoyable. You can do it alongside your job because it only requires a few hours of work per week and is super beginner friendly. If you want to learn more about it, check the link in the description below. Then from there, it's also crucial that you consider adding multiple sources of income. Believe it or not, this step is so important that the IRS actually published their research on high-income tax returns to discover why rich people are rich. What they found was that the more income sources you have, the more money you tend to make. Now, of course, if you're curious which income sources are the most common for millionaires, the number one starts with the typical job. For most people, this is the cash cow that makes everything else possible. Like number 2, dividend income. This is probably the easiest second source of income for anybody to be able to do immediately starting today, just by owning a stock ETF or index fund that pays you on a regular basis. This is also very closely related to the third millionaire income source, and that would be capital gains. This one is often claimed to be the reason why millionaires avoid paying taxes. But in all reality, it's simply because the long-term capital gains tax rate is lower than that of earned income. But the point still remains. This can be very profitable if you set it up the right way. For example, fourth, once you start earning money, you could also branch out to rental properties. Sure, it might be a lot of work when you're just starting out, but with a consistent income, good credit score, and knowledge of a particular market, you could do quite well, even during a time where inventory is low. And then finally, fifth, you could increase your income by working a side hustle or taking on a part-time job. I personally tend to believe that this is one of the most underutilized income sources that people are not taking advantage of, especially when you consider that people are wasting 2.5 hours a day on social media. Just imagine what people would be able to accomplish if they just put that focus into something more productive. I just think working any type of side hustle that's independent from your main source of income is not only a good way to make more money, but also diversify yourself, just in case something happens to your job. For example, a few days ago, I earned $1,000 in a single day from my side hustle that only requires a few hours of work per week. Beyond that, no matter how much money you make, if you want to actually build wealth, it's crucial that you avoid what's called lifestyle inflation. This is what happens when, say for example, you're making $40,000 a year, you're paying all your bills, no complaints, and you're getting by just fine. But as soon as you get a promotion and start earning $60,000, all of a sudden you reward yourself with maybe a slightly nicer house, a faster car, and maybe start going out for meals a little bit more often. Nothing big, but just small things. But then a year or two later, you start making $90,000 a year. All of a sudden, you want to upgrade your apartment? Or maybe you want to buy a Tesla Model X because that's what everyone drives when you make $90,000 a year. I think you could probably see where this is going. I've seen so many situations where people are making $160,000 a year and are still not able to save any extra money than they were when they were making $40,000 a year, despite making 4 times more money. And if you don't believe me, according to multiple studies, nearly half of people making over $100,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck in the United States. Personally, I found one of the best ways to overcome this is by pretending any extra money you make doesn't exist. Live on the exact same amount as you were before and invest the difference immediately. In this case, if you're making $40,000 and you get a raise to $60,000, well, great. Now you could save an extra $20,000. The way I see it, this is not a time for you to reward yourself for making more money. Instead, the reward is that your money now works for you, not the other way around. Here's the way I think of it. If I want to buy something, I just figure out how much I need to have invested so that my investments pay for it. For example, if I want to spend $100 a week eating out at restaurants, I know that I'll have to have $130,000 invested to be able to pay for it. This way, I know that whatever I purchase or spend is sustainable, no matter what happens to my income. Throughout my 20s, I lived by the motto that I would invest my money to pay for the things that I wanted, and then I would save for the specific investments, not the thing itself. I promise that by thinking this way, it's going to help change the way you see money, which then brings me to my last point, and that is this. Studies show that it's usually best to invest your money immediately. I know this is super basic stuff for YouTube, but this concept of passive income really changed my entire mindset as a teenager. Think about it like this. $1 invested at 20 years old at a 7% return is going to be worth $21 at the age of 65. However, if you wait and you invest that exact same $1 at the age of 30, it's only going to be worth $10.68 by the same age of 65. This means your money is worth twice as much when you're 20 years old than it is when you're 30. And when I saw that math, it just opened up the possibilities. All of a sudden, it was like I was in a race to invest as much money as I could as soon as I could, because I didn't want to waste the opportunity to let it grow for as long as I possibly can. In this case, that $5 Starbucks you splurged on is actually worth $105 of future money. Those $100 pair of shoes that you only wore twice is actually worth $2,100 in future money. Or how about that slightly nicer apartment that cost you a few $100s a month more? That could be life-changing money by the time you're older. So why waste it now? In terms of a step-by-step guide that you can follow when it comes to this, personally, I would begin by opening up a Roth IRA. This is a retirement account that you're able to invest up to $6,500 a year into. And all the profit you make within that account is completely tax-free by the age of 59 and a half. For anybody who is young, this is especially good for 3 reasons. First, you're probably not making a lot of money right now, which means you're in a low tax bracket. This means that very little money is lost upfront to taxes, leaving you with more money left over to invest. Second, you'll also be young enough to enjoy decades of compound interest and growth, which means even more money left over in the future. And third, it's incredibly easy to do because almost every brokerage out there offers a Roth IRA that you could set up yourself in like 15 minutes. But just to show you how great this is, if you're able to invest $500 a month into a Roth IRA and the average is 7% return, by the age of 65, you're going to have $2,250,000 waiting for you tax-free. If you could just follow this one strategy, you'll have nearly guaranteed your retirement with an income of nearly $90,000 a year for the rest of your life just by having that as a nest egg. Then from there, if you're curious about what you can invest in, personally, I just take a broad approach and invest in an index fund that covers everything, including the S&P 500. Ideally, all you do is just dollar cost average on a regular basis, don't panic sell, don't touch it for 30 years, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, you profit. Secondly, if you also plan on living in the same area for more than 10 years and you have disposable income, you can also look into buying rental property through what's called house hacking. This is when you buy a property for yourself, rent out the bedrooms or other units to provide additional income to cover your expenses, leaving you with a place left over for free. And then eventually, if you find another deal, you can move on to that while keeping the previous one for cash flow. This is how savvy millennials are able to build up a portfolio of rental properties throughout the US in their 20s. And in my opinion, this is one of the best ways to build your wealth over time while also keeping your expenses as low as possible. Now I understand that even with building your credit, reducing your expenses, switching jobs, maximizing your income, and working a side hustle, it's probably not going to happen overnight. It's also easier said than done. And even if you do everything on the list, it's still not a guarantee that you're going to get rich. But you will have a much higher likelihood of achieving it if you're dedicated to increasing your income, living below your means, sacrificing short-term discretionary income for the sake of investing immediately, and making it a goal that you have to achieve by pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. In fact, I bet most people would find it incredibly easy to save an extra 10% of their income if they just use a website like Mint.com, which tracks all of their expenses, and then you would just need to cut back on the things you don't need. I know it sounds trivial to start penny pinching here and there for the sake of saving more money, but all of these things really do start adding up. If you want to increase your income, click the link in the description below, and I'll see you in the next video.